Hi, Ola. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so thrilled to have you, for you to come and share with us and all of our listeners in our network about the immigration landscape in two jurisdictions today. So we feel very lucky, Cameroon and Sierra Leone, even though you are based in Nigeria. Is that correct?
That's true. That's correct. It's a
Yes.
pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you so much. And it's really great that you have the ability and the capacity and partnerships in place to assist people who need immigration support in those locations. So I want to get the ball rolling. I want to hear more about you, your team. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Okay, so Advocate Law Practice, we're a full-service law firm. And like you said, we're based in Lagos, and we also have offices in Abuja. So with a network of partners, we're able to provide legal and public policy services, which includes immigration solutions to high net worth clients in Nigeria, Cameroon, and Sierra Leone, and also the Gambia. So we have a combined staff of 15 in Nigeria in both our Lagos and Abuja offices. And of course, we partner with other firms in Cameroon, Sierra Leone, and Gambia, like I mentioned.
Yes, yes, wonderful. So tell me, Ola, give us sort of a brief insight into the immigration landscape in both of those jurisdictions as a response to COVID-19.
Okay, so presently, as you probably know, a number of African countries are slowly opening up their borders. In terms of Sierra Leone, we've seen Lunge Airport in Sierra Leone reopen in the last few weeks, whilst also in Cameroon, in the city of Douala, the airport has been open since July 17th, allowing for a number of commercial flights in and out of the country. That said, and despite the ECOWAS protocol with respect to the reopening of land borders, the restrictions on land borders are still in place. So we're yet to see the cross-border movement of people and goods, save for the goods which are deemed essential. So in terms of immigration policy and procedures, what we're now seeing with most countries is the introduction of rigorous testing procedures for those seeking to enter or leave these countries, and of course, stringent quarantine measures being put in place. So, for instance, to travel to Cameroon, you're required to have a COVID test 72 hours before your flight into the country, and upon arrival, you're required to take another test within 72 hours. And even where you still test negative, you're required to still undergo self-isolation for 14 days.
Okay.
In Sierra Leone, the same requirement is in place for incoming visitors. Upon arrival, they're mandatorily required to take a test at a facility that has been provided at Lunge Airport.
Mm. Great. So the quarantine is all in place, and people still have to, despite being negative, taking those medical tests, they still have to, self-isolate for that period. But it's good to know that borders are opening up, and so things can sort of resume. With regards to immigration authorities and processing, are things fully operational in those jurisdictions? What's the current situation regarding processing of applications and so on?
So in Sierra Leone, the local authorities, have always been open. The country didn't really undergo a lockdown as most other nations underwent. I think there were 2 lockdown periods of 3 days each. Otherwise, business continued as normal, and what they had was a quarantine period. A curfew period that lasted overnight. But ordinarily, businesses were working as they were. And again, with Cameroon, everybody's back to work. The only thing that you may experience are slight delays with respect to your applications.
I see. So more of a backlog right now as a result of everything that's been happening and the circumstances surrounding COVID. Right, right. So would you say that even though that things were, there weren't intense lockdowns in those jurisdictions, as you say, were there any concessions that were made or directives in those respective jurisdictions that would support local expats who couldn't, move or go back to their home countries, and with their visas expiring, were there any concessions that were made or facilitated to support them?
Yes. So given the fact that all borders were closed, a number of expatriates could have found themselves, or visitors could have found that their visas expired whilst in country. So for those category of travelers and visitors, their visas were deemed to have been extended in Sierra Leone, and for example in Cameroon, the government specifically came out and stated that such persons will not be penalized, and again that their visas are deemed extended by virtue of the restrictions from the coronavirus.
I see. And is there any projection on when those concessions will end? I mean, anything that people need to know that are stuck in those jurisdictions? Is it an automatic renewal or concessions, or do people still really kind of have to go through an extension application process?
So it's deemed to be automatic.
Okay.
But flights have resumed in both jurisdictions. Whilst in Cameroon, the number of flights are slightly higher. In Sierra Leone, the number of flights are not significant. So the ability for expatriates to leave the country is still slow going, so to speak. So yes, the situation is very fluid as things move on. But yes, they're not going to be penalized for it, and it will not. From what the government of Cameroon said, it will not affect future applications.
Yes, well, that's really great to know, so that people who end up leaving, they're not in any way become undesirable or inadmissible to be able to apply and re-enter at some point in the future. So that's really great. Correct. that the authorities support that. Now, we're talking about those that are stuck within those jurisdictions. What about those expats who had applied to work or needed to have their assignments in those jurisdictions, had their visas approved, but then COVID happened and they couldn't travel to be able to facilitate or to be able to start their work assignments? Do those visas expire? Do these visas, are they still valid, or do they have to start the process all over again?
So for those who didn't come in or weren't able to come in prior to the lockdown, right, they may need to apply for new visas. And I know visas applications are now being taken as it relates to Cameroon. Sierra Leone has always been open in terms of business, but again, if the visas were not utilized prior to lockdown, and given the fact that the airports in Sierra Leone it's still slow, the likelihood is again that the applicants would need to reapply for a visa.
I see. So do you think that, or is it, and not even the do you think, it's more of, are the governmental authorities in some way a little bit lenient in terms of requirements for the extensions for expats that are stuck within country right now? Or do you think that they're also sort of from a projection or planning status that they will become a little bit more lenient on requirements, or are things going to be pretty much the same?
When you say requirements, are you talking in terms of, documentation required for processing? Yes. If that's the case, I do not think there will be any concessions in that regard. If anything at all, there could be the introduction of some kind of clearance of COVID-19
Yes.
free certificate. But apart from that, I don't see them sort of like relaxing the old requirements in terms of documentation for
Yeah.
processing.
And what I'm seeing, in various jurisdictions across the board, they may not necessarily waive requirements or be lenient in any way, but they are adding some requirements, particularly with regards to medical clearances, like you said. Do you anticipate that that would also be the same in jurisdictions like Cameroon and Sierra Leone, that, in addition to the application and the documentation and supporting docs, are they going to sort of add that in as an addition?
That is indeed already the case. If you want to come into Sierra Leone or into Cameroon, you're required to have taken your test and be able to present certificates showing that your test was negative. I think, again, there's probably going to be some imposition on airlines to enforce that as well. So yes, those measures are already in place in terms of health guidelines. Yes.
I see. Just out of curiosity, and if you know, what is the infection rate on those jurisdictions right now? Are the numbers quite high?
The numbers in Cameroon are quite high, but the numbers in Sierra Leone have reduced slightly, and the rate of infection has reduced as well.
Great, that's really good news. So just moving on to sort of the general landscape of immigration in those locations, are there any particular industries that are more favored than others? Have they been done so before or now? Or do you see any industries that are more favorable? All industries pretty much treated the same way when it comes to immigration applications, secondments for assignees, particular corporations. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I think it's pretty much even Stevens for the various industries in terms of immigration application. Obviously, in terms, if they're relief workers, they get special status in terms of their immigration status. But apart from that, on a normal day-to-day immigration application for expatriates, all industries is pretty much the same across board.
I see. Yeah, I'm also curious. I speak to quite a few partners in this in our line of work, kind of in terms of new rules that are being implemented on particular countries coming in, and they have different categories. Does Sierra Leone and Cameroon have certain categories of countries that can come in right now, or again, is it sort of an even Stevens playing field?
No, there's no form of discrimination as to who can come in and who can't, provided that the guidelines in terms of health, in terms of testing, have been complied with.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's good. That's good to hear. So with companies now, in light of COVID-19 and planning and seeing how the circumstances may change, obviously we are all in hopes that it's going to change in a positive direction. What would you recommend to companies who want to plan for the future regarding their staff, their business establishments, maybe throwing in there, how applications are being processed right now, what the processing times are for work visas or residency visas for foreign employees who want to come into those jurisdictions? What would you advise them to do? What would you recommend?
I think one of the most important thing is to ensure that they have the full information. Like I said, the situation is extremely fluid. Things are changing each and every single day, you
Yes.
know, in every single jurisdiction,
Yes.
even in Europe and America. So what we would encourage is ensure that you're up to date, knowledge-wise, with what is going on. They should ensure full compliance with the relevant statutory requirements, and they should allow for adequate timing for the processing of their applications so as to prevent delays.
Mm. Yes, no, that's incredibly helpful. I think having all the information at hand and reaching out to the correct people to support you through that process is imperative. With regards to adequate timing, Ola, do you know what the processing time currently is for work visa applications and residencies? Any ballpark, 2-3 months or so?
Well, Cameroon is slightly slower than Sierra Leone, but you know, I think what is key is if the processing times in, let's say, Sierra Leone takes between 5 to 2 weeks, let's give it a month. If Cameroon takes 1 month, let's plan ahead and give it 2 months.
Yes.
So that way, you know, we're within the required timelines to be able to ensure we get to our assignments on time.
Yes, of course. And I mean, in that light, I would think, and let me know if you agree, just from a business perspective, I think now is the time for companies to be a little bit more flexible in terms of their secondments and assignments. I know that sometimes it's out of their hands when they need particular projects to be to start on time and you know procedurally. But do you think that they need to look into that? You know, that flexibility in terms of applying for these respective visas in due course?
Yeah, most definitely they should. Though the pandemic has impacted most businesses negatively, it's also created numerous opportunities, particularly in areas such as health and education.
Yeah.
So, in terms of businesses being flexible in preparing for future investing opportunities, it's required. You know, these are uncertain times, and
Yes.
we're all evolving.
Yes, absolutely. I'm total agreement on that point. So Ola, as we wrap up, is there anything else that you wish to share on this topic within the parameters of what we've been chatting about to share with our listeners and to businesses out there as we evolve forward during these uncertain times?
Okay, so like I said earlier, the situation is pretty fluid across the globe. So without doubt, immigration policies globally will become drastically different from how we know them. And no doubt these policies will impact global trade. We're already witnessing this with the takeoff of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement being deferred. So it's important that businesses and expatriates continue to monitor events as they unfold,
Yes.
so that the impact of any change to policies don't adversely, you know, affect their businesses.
Yes, absolutely. That's great advice and recommendations and pertinent information that everyone across the globe, I'm sure, is going to be very appreciative of. And we can't thank you enough for joining us today and taking the time to share your expertise with us. And I'm sure our listeners are very grateful for that and will be in touch with us should they require that type of immigration support in those jurisdictions. And we are at Relocation Africa just so happy to be working with you as we move forward. So thank you so much again.
Thanks for having me.
I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.